So this morning, I'm very happy to have as a guest on our Biodiversity as an Asset Class video series, Daniel Perdomo-Rodriguez, who is an Associate Director at the Carbon Trust. So we've been discussing just on an informal basis how biodiversity can be protected or accounted for through ESG in developing economies. And Daniel has loads of experience to bring to bear on this question because he's been working with governments and development banks across Latin America designing programs.
Thank you very much, Colleen. So first of all, I would like to thanks for this opportunity. It's a very exciting topic, and I'm very glad to be here with you. Before answering exactly the question about how ESG can be a very good opportunity for this, I think it's important to give one step back as a context, answering about why biodiversity matters and why should we take more this seriously. So I will to answer this particular topic from two angles, one from an economic angle and then from an environmental angle. So starting with the economic angle, we know that the GDP on a global level is around 87 trillion US dollars. And we have a lot of research going on about how what's the contribution of biodiversity in the global GDP, and it's around 50%. So around $44 trillion. You need biodiversity in order to produce that GDP. So that's very important to have it in mind. And secondly, we know that climate change is one of the high risks that as a planet we are facing, and biodiversity is being affected seriously by climate change. But the good news is that biodiversity as well is an opportunity in order to reduce climate change. So biodiversity is instrumental as a mitigation option, but as well as an adaptation option to climate change. So this as a context about why biodiversity matters. And now moving about how to stop this biodiversity loss, I think that the key strategy is follow the money. You need to follow the money to understand the flows of what is producing that we are not using in the right way biodiversity, and to understand what are the mechanisms and what are the instruments available today in terms of sustainable finance in order to accelerate the pace to have best practices and to stop biodiversity loss and land degradation. So doing a very quick review about what are those sustainable financial strategies that are available in the market, you will find that there are around 7, from impact investment, sustainable investment, positive or best in class screening. You have 7, and within those 7, there are 2 that are the most common ones that will take more or less like more than 60% of that pie. And one is negative or exclusionary screening, and the second one is ESG. And what we see is that in the future, the ESG one is the one that is going to dominate the market. And what ESG provides is a common language or a framework for all the investors to have tools in order to shift the capital, to shift those financial flows towards sustainable practices. So that's why it's very important to see ESG as a platform or a mechanism in order to protect biodiversity. Yes, so one particular case, Jamaica. So Jamaica has a lot of mangroves, and mangroves has a lot of biodiversity. And going back to the point about climate change, of the relation between climate change and biodiversity, mangroves are an excellent way to absorb CO2. And so this is the mitigation component, but the same way as an adaptation, it protects from hurricanes and from heavy rain as well population. So that's why mangroves are very important. And the IDB now it is working for next year how to how to help the Caribbean to take advantage of biodiversity to protect their land, and they are starting to see how to produce financial instruments that will be ESG compliant, as I mentioned. And when we are talking about ESG, it's not just from the investor side, but as well from all the supply chain. So we are talking here about all the growers, producers, and traders of all the asset classes that we have within biodiversity. So normally, so normally what we have seen is that there is a big push for what is called soft commodities, and within soft commodities you have soy, palm oil, beef, and PPT. That in PPT you have paper, pulp, and timber. So there is a big push from banks in order to adopt these best practices. In Latin America, depending on the country, the regulation sometimes is not the best driver. You can have a lot of regulation, but that in practice doesn't work. So you need to work with different stakeholders. As I mentioned, investors are very important. So if investors are following ESG standards, then that's an important mechanism. But as well, that the end users and that there's a supply chain due diligence that is enforcing that the companies that are working within this value chain are following these best practices. So I think that that's the key role of ESG, that you are not only tackling from the government side towards companies, but from investors and also end users and across the supply chain due diligence. And it's about this new trend related to fintech and sustainable finance that here comes. What's the importance about data? Because without data, then banks and investors cannot make wise solutions and investments. And what we have seen is that these fintech solutions that are happening here in the West are transferring to Latin America, and that there are new market players in the financial sectors that are these fintechs that are offering not only B2B but also B2C solutions to help shift capital flows to these sustainable projects. And without that, it will be very difficult. We know that as well, satellites are providing a lot of data. So in mangroves or in forest, it can help you to do the MRB, that is the monitoring, reporting, and verification. We are all looking into the UN goals about sustainable development goals, and there is one in particular that is number 15 about life on land. And there is one initiative in the financial sector that is looking particularly into that one. It's an alliance between the Banking Environment Initiative and the Consumer Goods Forum that is providing banks to develop policies and financing solutions for clients in four soft commodities that are soy, palm oil, beef, and PP&T, that stands for paper, pulp, and timber. So here in the UK, you will find the usual suspects. You have Barclays, BNP Paribas, Deutsche Bank, Lloyds, and Rabobank, among others that are part of this initiative that are creating these tools to help achieve the net zero deforestation goal. So I think that this is very important, because what we have seen is that regulation is always one step behind what is happening in terms of best practices. And then eventually those best practices will come as new market norms. And then hopefully we will transfer this type of mechanisms or initiatives to Latin America that will help banks to put more pressure in order to stop deforestation loss. I think that's a very important initiative to mention, and something very exciting of what we can do in order to accelerate the pace to a more sustainable world.